All right, here I am, still inside Acrobat looking at that PDF file. And at first glance, everything looks like it's working out beautifully, which is why we, of course, glance at things more than once. And when we do, often as not, we discover mistakes. For example, in the case of this document, if I go ahead and advance to the second page, which represents the Pantone 325 color, and I go ahead and zoom in here on the left side of this artwork, you can see that we have a little bit of an edge to the ring. So in other words, a piece of that ring that ought to be printing in that deep blue is going to end up printing in the turquoise instead. And the same is true, but even a little bit worse, down here in the lower right region of the logo. So what we've got to do is fix that problem by totally dividing those shapes. It's not good enough to work with a clipping group. We need to divide that logo graphic into two pieces. All right, so I'll go ahead and switch back to Illustrator. And I'm going to twirl open the solid colors layer right there. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the clipping group because currently it's just a big problem. And now I'm going to go ahead and click on that base shapes layer, which contains all of my primitive graphics, as you can see right here. And I'm really grateful at this point that I kept all of these path outlines because this is the second time I've needed to access them. So what I'm going to do is with this layer selected, I'll go up to the flyout menu and I'll choose Duplicate Base Shapes. And now I'll turn off the original because we want to keep those guys intact. And I'll go ahead and rename this guy Rotated because I'm now going to rotate these shapes by first selecting all of them, which you can do by clicking in the upper right corner of the layer in the Layers panel. And then I'll go ahead and select the Rotate tool, which of course you can get by pressing the R key. And then Alt-click or Option-click right here on this center point in order to bring up the Rotate dialog box. And with any luck, your angle will still be set to -30 degrees, at which point you can click OK. All right, now, just to preserve each and every step, I'm going to create a copy of this layer by once again going up to the flyout menu and choosing Duplicate Rotated. And I'm going to move this guy up to just above the fused art layer. And now I'll double-click on an empty portion of the layer to bring up the Layer Options dialog box. And I'll call this guy Independent Rocket, and I'll change its color to that same color that I'm using for the solid colors layer, which is gold, and I'll click OK. And that's because I'm going to use this layer in order to color my shapes. But first, I need to separate them. And I'm going to do that by pressing the V key to switch back to my black arrow tool. And I'm going to partially marquee just the black shapes like so. You do not want to select the rocket. And then go up to the window menu and choose the Pathfinder command. And I'm going to take advantage of a really great but little-known Pathfinder that comes in really super handy an awful lot. It's basically that Pathfinder option you want to use when nothing else seems to work. And it's this guy right here in the bottom left corner, Divide. And that's going to divide up all the shapes into pieces. And now I'll close the Pathfinder panel. Now, it's not going to look like it's done anything, and that's because all the shapes are grouped together automatically. And so I'm going to go up to the Object menu and choose the Ungroup command, or press Control-Shift-G or Command-Shift-G on a Mac in order to ungroup those shapes so that we have a bunch of independent path outlines, as you can see right here. All right, I'll go ahead and undo the movement of those various paths, and I'll click on this bottom path right there, and I'll change its fill color here inside the Swatches panel to Pantone 325 in order to fill it, of course, with that turquoise. And now I'll go ahead and select all of the black shapes by marqueing these guys right there and then shift-clicking on this little bit of ring. And I'll bring back my Pathfinder panel, which happens to be right here, and I'll click on Unite. And this may or may not work. We'll see. Nope, doesn't work. And actually, I missed a path as well, so that's a problem. But I went ahead and filled in the gaps there, which is not what I want to do. So I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And instead, I'll just go ahead and click on this piece of ring, shift-click on these pieces right there, and shift-click on this one as well. So I've selected the entire ring now, and I'll join it together by clicking on Unite. And now that everything's working out the way I want it to, now that I'm preserving my holes, I'll shift-click on this area and shift-click on this top portion of the planet as well. And I'll join them together by clicking on this very first Pathfinder operation, Unite, once again. And this time I get exactly the effect I'm looking for. All right, now I'll hide the Pathfinder panel, and I'll assign Pantone 285, that deep blue, to that shape. All right, now what we need to do is confirm that everything's working the way we think it is. I'll go ahead and twirl open this layer, And there's the compound shape that represents the rocket right there on the top. So far I have not subtracted the rocket from the other shapes. But notice that we have a couple of additional paths right here. This guy, which isn't serving any function. So I'll go ahead and click on its meatball and then press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of it. And then there's this guy right there as well at the bottom. He's an extra path on the inside of the top portion of the ring. And so I'll go ahead and press backspace or delete to get rid of it as well. All right, now let's select all of these paths by clicking in the upper right corner of this layer. And I'm going to duplicate them to the solid colors layer by pressing the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and dragging the square right there all the way up and dropping it onto solid colors like so. And that just goes ahead and makes a duplicate of all those objects on the independent rocket layer. All right, now I'll go ahead and twirl that layer closed and turn it off so that all those objects are protected and I can come back to them anytime I like. And now I will make the permanent modification here on this solid colors layer by first clicking off my shapes to deselect them, and then I'll click on any of the rocket shapes to select the entire thing. I want to fuse all of these shapes into a single path outline, and so I will once again return to my Pathfinder panel. The expand button, however, is dimmed. This is a little bit of a bug. What you have to do if you encounter this is click off the paths to deselect them and select them again. Just click on them again, and this time you should see that expand button light up, at which point go ahead and click on it to render out all of those subpaths into a single path outline. All right, we're going to need 2 copies of this rocket, first to cut it out of the Earth and then to cut it out of the top of Saturn. And so go ahead and press Control-C or Command-C on the Mac to create a copy of it, and then Shift-click on the Earth path down below here, and go ahead and click on the minus front icon here inside the Pathfinders panel. You can see that I've now successfully cut the rocket out of the bottom shapes, but I have not cut it out of the top shape. So I'll go ahead and press Control-F or Command-F on the Mac in order to paste that copy of the rocket to the front of the layer, and then I'll shift-click on the big blue path, and I'll click on minus front once again in order to cut the rocket out of the top of Saturn. And now that I'm done with the Pathfinder panel, I'll go ahead and hide it by clicking on this double arrow icon, and I'll click off the path outline to deselect it. And finally, to confirm that everything's working as you want it to, go up to the File menu and once again choose the Print command. And you should see all of your previously applied options in place. So in other words, the printer is set to Adobe PDF. We've got all the printer marks turned on. And then if I click on Output, you can see that Mode is set to Separations, and that just those 3 spot colors have little printer icons in front of them, at which point go ahead and click on the Print button. And then in my case, I'm going to go ahead and replace this file called pristineparations.pdf and save over it by clicking on the Yes button as well. And that'll go ahead and automatically open that file, in my case, inside Acrobat Pro. All right, now I'm going to click the down pointing arrowhead to advance to Pantone 325. And I'll go ahead and zoom in on that shape by Control Spacebar clicking. That's a Command Spacebar click on the Mac. And you can see that we have no weird edges whatsoever, and that every single shape on each and every plate is indeed pristine.